Brisbane Lions, of the 8 teams in the finals, they're under the most heat.
They are, Damo. It's going to be huge on Thursday night against Richmond, who know how to win big finals. We've seen it time and time again in recent memory. And this is the last time they met. So it was all Brisbane for the first half. It was 42 points up in the second quarter, and you thought, how far? But once Richmond raised the stakes from a pressure perspective, they went missing in a sense. And you look at last year, Kano, first week of the finals, they lost to Melbourne by 33 points, then lost at the Gabba by 1 point to the Western Bulldogs. And against Melbourne in round 15, lost by 64 points at the MCG, and then got belted 2 weeks ago by 58 points. So are they mentally and physically tough enough? That's what I want to see on Thursday.
Yeah, they look fragile, don't they, Lordo? And one player from Richmond who absolutely got a hold of them. They had no answers in that round 20 game that you speak of is Shea Bolden. In the second half, his numbers were extraordinary. Let's have a look at some of what he did. But 13 disposed in the second half, 5 inside 50s. He kicked 2 goals, 5. And they put no time into him. So I expect a completely different strategy. I don't know who the obvious player is. In fact, there isn't an obvious Brisbane player that can go to him. But I hope someone's set for him. I hope someone tries to really physically get after him and almost bash him off the ball fairly. And that can be Starcevic. He probably has that role in him. But then he will get the matchup that he wants on ball and slide forward. He plays a unique role and he's the best player on the ground in that game on Thursday night.
So much pressure on so many players. Where's the brightest light going to be shining on in this game?
We'll take a look at Joey Daniher, Damo, as we take a look at the final spotlight for this final series. We're going to do it for every game, and for me, it's this man, Joe Daniher. So he, I thought, would be the best player in the game at some period of his career, and he may have been at one point at Essendon when he made All-Australian, but he hasn't been since he went up to Brisbane. And last year's final against the Western Bulldogs, 6 disposals in a game. You should never have 6 disposals in a game. I don't care if you're a key forward. You've got to get involved in the game more. And then also the Brisbane Lions' accuracy. Caro, they've missed some big shots in big moments where I reckon it's just got the better of them.
They have, but Kane, if Richmond have an Achilles heel, it's in defence, and obviously Grimes has been out for a while, and more inexperienced defence, and obviously Tarrant's come in and been slow start, but has finished the season pretty well. But if Brisbane perform up forward, you think they might just get them?
Yeah, I think you're right, Carol. I think that's the vulnerability of Richmond, and that is the defensive post, particularly with Grimes out of there. And Robbie Tarrant, you mentioned, he did start slowly, but I reckon he's been pretty solid since probably the halfway point of the year. But you mentioned Daniher, Lordy, he probably does get that matchup, and you just don't want to get in a wrestle with him because he'll love that. He's 33 years of age now. Clearly his speed and his agility will be his weakness, as you're seeing there. And if Daniher gets up the ground, he started this game particularly well, and then tries to turn him around, then he could be in a bit of trouble. Just don't stand there and wrestle against Robbie Tarrant. After that, though, if he's beaten Caro, there's not much else from the key defensive spot at the Tigers.
So you mentioned Shai Bolton, and Damien, he wasn't at training today, had a personal issue, but Richmond insists he'll be making the trip, as will Dustin Martin. He's been declared in, hasn't played since the 1st or 2nd of July in that West Coast game where he had the hamstring awareness. I suppose we've got to contribute something to this segment, being the non-football people. Do you think that this could be his last game for Richmond if they lose?
Well, there's only been 8 this year, as you know, Caro, for a combination of personal and hamstring reasons. There is every chance, if they were to lose this game, that the conversation we've long thought now, haven't we, that it would be had at the end of the year. And it was Peggy O'Neill, it was Brendan Gale, it was Damien Hardwick who flagged it publicly, more so than the media at that point in time, that this was a conversation to be parked. I still expect that conversation to be had, and it's possible that it is the last game he plays for the Tigers, with the 2 years of a deal to run.
It's the right call, Lordo. He hasn't played since round 16 to play him, though, but the expectations, he is the greatest finals player that I've ever seen, but it can't expect him to be that dusty. He hasn't played for a long time.
No, 8 games he's played this year, so I see him as just a pure forward. If he can kick a couple of goals, apply pressure, that's all you can hope for someone who's missed so much footy. But who takes him, in a sense? It's a big risk.
Well, Sydney vehemently deny they're into him. GWS, I don't think, would have the room. Gold Coast was the other club linked to Dustin Martin. They also vehemently deny that they're having a look at him. So it's a lot of money for a player of his age. If I've got money on it now, I reckon he stays at Richmond.
Finals football returns to the MCG after 2 seasons of COVID. The second of the 2 MCG games, it's probably the biggest one, the Collingwood and Geelong game. Yeah, you must play 4 quarters against Geelong. So they've won 13 in a row for a reason. They're the best side going in it. They've won their 13 games by an average of 39 points. And Collingwood's pressure, it's a long time ago, but this is when we all sat up and took notice. OK, Collingwood could potentially be the real deal with the pressure they put on Geelong.
But you've got to sustain it against Geelong, and this was the last quarter, 7-2, 44 to 1 behind, and that's what I've seen as the season's rolled on, Kano, against Geelong. You got to. Collingwood have played in patches this year. They've got to play 4 quarters, otherwise I think Geelong could blow them away.
Yeah, well, there's not a weakness in their game, is there? Defensively, top 3 in both areas, really, and they just score off the turnover. So they will be well prepared. We'll speak to Chris Scott about that in depth, Damo, after this.
He'll be coming on very soon. Carol, before he does, let's take a look at what Jeremy Howe said yesterday on the Sunday Footy Show about the impact of the loss of Brodie Grundy.
When he's up and going, he's arguably one of our greatest players. Our centre bounce work has probably dropped away since he's been out of the side, and it's been a bit of an impact for us. And he's just trying so hard to get his body right. It's unfortunate that he hurt his ankle in that VFL game, because it felt like he could have been important for us in the pointy end of the season.
Yeah, there was a point there where I thought they were desperate to get him back, and the Anzac Day, the second game against Essendon, they were exposed by Sam Draper, particularly late. And you've got Cox and Cameron, and this is what has happened with and without Grundy. You can see the drop-off there. That's what Jeremy Howe is alluding to. So if you allow Geelong to dominate you out of the centre bounce, good luck. Good luck stopping it with the forward line that they've got. Hawkins, Cameron and Tyson Stengel with the form they're in, they'll get smashed if they don't put up a better effort in the centre bounce.
Time to look now at this game's finals spotlight.
Damo, you want to be remembered for finals and what you did. And Luke Hodges remembered, and also Dustin Martin's remembered. And Gary Rowan, Gary's got to go into this final going, let's focus on my pressure. Pressure, 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 and the rest will take care of itself, because I think in the last year's prelim he had 1 touch, and the grand final before that he had 5 disposals. They're not numbers you want in a final, and Chris Scott's always had belief in him because of what he does do off the ball, but you've got to find the footy and bring that pressure. And Will Hoskinell's another player for mine who just doesn't do enough if he hasn't got the footy in his hands.
So Jordan De Goey, who has performed well in finals, but has also not performed and had injuries, as we know. Collingwood still haven't re-signed him. They say he's
Why haven't they?
Well, they've strung it out till the end of the season, which is really interesting.
So do they really want him? They say publicly they do, but do you think they really want him?
I think they're coming around to really wanting him. They say he's done all the right things. I think it's worked in their favour. I really do.
It's a brokering tool, isn't it, Cara? Just to keep the price down? It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see what Chris Scott has to say about Jordan De Goey and his future potentially at Geelong. St Kilda have played their hand and said they're interested. I reckon he stays at Collingwood, but you want to see him play finals and you want to see him play well in finals.
And he's the type of player that can stand up. He's got the physical attributes and the match-winning ability, and he was pretty good in 2018.
Oh, he's extraordinary in 2018.
Hasn't had a lot of experience since then, but he is the match-winning type of player that can win a critical contest at a critical stage and also be that centre-forward player that every team wants.
Yeah, I mean, his prelim and grand finals in 18 were
he owes them, though.
He got injured in 2019.
He absolutely owes them to put in a really strong finals performance with what he's put that club through.
Woody, to defend a premiership, you need to change. You need to organically grow. Has Melbourne done enough of that in your eyes to still believe that they can go back-to-back?
At about round 15 or 16, I would have said no. I couldn't see much change to what Melbourne were doing. But since then, I think once they started to lose games, they've gone 6-6 over their last 12. It's been the move of Brayshaw. He hadn't attended a centre bounce for the first 14 weeks. Harms went out as a sub. He's now dominating through the centre bounce. Luke Jackson has become the number 1 ruckman. Max Gawn has gone from 60%. In terms of midfield, 60%. His forward's gone from 12% to 40%. So huge change there from those key players. And Petrarca, big time forward, Gawn, big time forward as well.
Fascinating coaching moves, Lordy. Let's look at the final spotlight for this game, which is going to be big at the MCG. And you want to look at one Melbourne big man.
Yeah, I do, and it's Ben Brown. A lot of ball goes through Melbourne tools because what they do is they're very conservative. They'll kick to the pocket a lot. So Ben Brown's got to try and take at least 3 or 4 or 5 marks a game with the amount of ball that goes through him. But I just think he's missed timing and misjudging since he's come back into the team. So that's an aspect of his game where they're not scoring as well as a Geelong, I'd say, would through the final series. So the ball, I think their biggest issue is their cohesion going inside forward 50, and he's a big aspect of that.
And for me, the spotlight's on a Sydney big man. I'm not sure they would have thought Sam Reid would play much footy at all. It's been a bonus for the Swans on what he has delivered this year. So since round 11 he came in, this is the round 12 game. Look at those numbers. It was almost a career best night for him against Melbourne. And I think they got Laddams for a reason, and he was going to be a backup player with the injuries that he's had. But he's been way better than that since round 11, as I said. So I think Melbourne's biggest strength is their big man, Gawn and Jackson. And Gawn in that game was the best player on the ground and dominant. But Sam Reid's going to have to produce a big game. Hasn't played a final since 2017, but he's in good form.
Would you look at Tom McDonald, Matthew?
Damon and I don't disagree on this.
He doesn't agree with me.
No.
Hasn't done enough.
He got through the VFL on the weekend when he was playing on his first...
You think bring him in?
Well, they were points for 96 in the first 10 weeks of the season when he played 9 of those 10 games. They're points for 83 when he's missed. Now, I know that foot's really bad. He's got steel plates in it, he's got bolts in it, but he got through a VFL game, got 11 touches, kicked 1 goal. We know what he did last year. I'd be rolling the dice with him. And I know, to your point, Lido, it's Melksham who's probably the one who'd come out, but I think he offers more than Melksham.
Yeah, maybe fully fit, but not right now.
Yep. The fourth game, the fourth final, obviously, Fremantle v Western Bulldogs. There's some X factors in the Bulldogs. We'll get to them in a moment, but how do you see this one unfolding?
Well, it's the Dockers' defence has been extraordinary, Lordo. You want to take a look at what they've done there. Certainly points for versus points against. If they win Fremantle, it's going to be on the back of their extraordinary defence this year.
What jumps out at me, though, is the Western Bulldogs are the 11th ranked defence. So to win a premiership, you've got to be top 4. You look, Geelong are 3rd, Melbourne are 1st, Sydney are 4th, Fremantle are 2nd, and the Doggies fall to 11th. So I think potentially they could win one final at best, but you're not going to win too many more with the 11th ranked defence in the competition. And this is what I don't like about them. They don't man the mark. They actually sag off and allow for, in this game, 140 marks were taken by the Fremantle Dockers. So I think they've got to ramp up their pressure a lot more so if they've got to get through this final series, Kane.
They've been a poor defensive side, Damo, and once again, the final spotlight was we see Fremantle marching the ball up the ground. Dogs are a bit more switched on than that. Goes on a couple of their big man once again, and we'll take a look at Lobb and Tim English. Now, Lobb's going to be the most crucial forward for Fremantle. We'll get to that in a second, but Tim English has had a pretty solid year, has been one of the better ruckmen in the game when he has played. He's going to come up against Sean Darcy, different type of ruckman. Clearly, English has got to challenge him around the ground and try and get high amount of possessions for a ruckman. But just on Fremantle's forward line, in round 23 against GWS, they had 69 entries for just 6 marks inside 50. This is an underwhelming front 6 by any measure. This would be the concern. So as I said, if they win it, it's going to be on the back of their incredible 18-man defence that's going to come after the Western Bulldogs, because that's not intimidating for anyone. Lobb has been solid this year.
Stands
well,
up.
he's not. When's that happened, Damo? When has Fife ever stood up as a forward? His best play has been through the midfield, and he's had an interrupted year. They're trying to make him as a makeshift forward and provide a target down there, but it's going to be the smalls and their mids that are going to have to kick goals, and Rory Lobb's probably going to have to kick 4 for them to win.
Weirdly enough, I believe a guy who's about to play his 4th game of footy is the key to this game. Sam Darcy of the Western Bulldogs kicked 2 goals 2 against Hawthorn in round 23 when they needed someone to take a clunk and kick some goals at a delicate stage of a game. They needed to win in order to get there. Now, I know only playing his 4th game, Kane, that's going to be a massive task, but he's a talent. They've given him 2 months of VFL footy as a back, as a ruck, as a forward. He's now doing it all in the main stage.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good coaching move as well. What it means for Josh Bruce, we might get to that a little bit later on. I want to have a look at close checking. But, Caro, heading into this final series, the coaches are interesting. Who's the coach under the most pressure?
Oh, I think probably Chris Fagan. I think Chris Fagan, because it's a home final. They were top 4 for so long during the year, and as Michael Gleeson wrote in The Age on today, Richmond are playing with house money in a sense. They didn't look like they were going to make finals at one point. They've blooded some new young players. You feel positive about them going forward. I also think Luke Beveridge, to a degree, they've just fallen into the finals, but they did make the grand final last year. And I'd be disappointed in Justin Longmuir too, because he's playing a home final against the Western Bulldogs, who fell in, as I said. So, and, you know, the bloke we're about to talk to isn't exactly not under pressure, is he? Finished top of the ladder, an unbelievable performance in the home and away season. And I think maligned by some Geelong people, so Geelong supporters, Chris Scott.
You've named 4 of the 8. Any others?
The coach under most pressure is Chris Fagan, who I named first.
Thank you.
Kane, and I just expanded a bit.
I liked it.